Traveling is awesome, but it can be expensive. Have you ever considered the possibility that travel could be cheaper than living?
Well, today we're going to share some of our experiences that can help you to answer that question for yourself.
Yeah! You got to do something.
It is a beautiful day today.
It is a beautiful day. We need to twirl. You. Oh, look at you smiling at the camera so sweetly. I look over and he's like,
Just imagining all those adoring fans out there. Happy to see my face again this week.
Hi everyone, welcome to Learning Brave. I'm Skylar.
I'm Ross.
And today we are talking about money and travel. Now, many people assume that full-time travelers need to have lots of money.
And to be super wealthy to be able to travel.
I wish that this was true. No, I don't.
No, you don't. I wish that it's not true.
I wish we had lots of money.
That's better.
And we were traveling.
Yes.
But we are proof that you can travel, even full-time travel, without a whole lot of money. There are just some tricky things to learn.
Now, in our travels, we've actually met a whole range, a whole spectrum of travelers that have either been wealthy, sort of middle range, and some that were definitely, I wouldn't say dirt poor, but certainly no better, no worse off than others that we've met who live a sedentary life. So for us, we have probably been sort of across the spectrum as well at different times. And so over the next 3 or 4 weeks, we are going to be introducing to you a series of episodes that talk through many of the aspects of traveling and finance and sharing our story, and we hope you enjoy the ride.
So in our story, we've actually experienced, like Ross said, we've had money and then had no money and then tried to work out independent income. So we'll get to that. I first heard this crazy concept when I was reading a blog before we went traveling. I was doing some research and I came across this concept that travel was cheaper than living. In fact, the writer of the blog claimed this fact. And I was like, no, that can't be true.
Surely not.
I mean, we'd only experienced holidays, which are definitely not cheaper than living. You save up and you spend a ridiculous amount of money and then you come home and recover.
So we decided,
basically.
Yeah, I remember holidays that I would go and I'd be thinking, why do I do this? We save up all this money, we spend all this money. I come home from the holiday and go, gee, I'm glad I'm back at work. That was really stressful.
Not always. Maybe not everyone has holidays like that. Sometimes work.
Sometimes for me, for sure.
I mean, they can be exhausting. Yeah, and so holidaying and full-time travel are totally different things.
Yeah.
So this concept of this claim that travel was cheaper than living really intrigued me enough that we decided to literally put our lives on the line and put it to the test.
Test it out.
Because we're crazy.
Well, I mean, and we will explain this a little bit more as the episodes continue, but there are other things happening in life. I think the stars aligned for us to really want to get out and test this theory for ourselves, and we certainly have done that over the past 4 years.
Yeah, we have tested it, and we're here to give you the answer. Is travel cheaper than living?
In short, it depends.
Yeah.
It depends.
Yes, it can be.
It certainly can be. We've been in places that it is a lot cheaper to travel than to live back in my country of Australia or even here in the United States.
Yeah.
But there have also been places that we've been where we're like, holy smokes, we need to get out of here. We are going to lose our money in the first day.
Yeah, so to set the scene, to begin with,
shall we give 2 contrasts?
We'll give 2 contrasts.
Okay.
So we put this to the test, and we've now, as a family, traveled to 25 different countries, and we can solidly answer that travel can be cheaper than living. It very much depends where.
Absolutely.
And also your income and things like that. But we'll get to that. But
So to start with, let me tell you a little story about when we first embarked on our sort of family travel adventure, and I went to see, what's the cheapest flight from Melbourne, Australia to Europe. And the cheapest flight actually flew into Zurich, Switzerland. I thought, that's great.
We were so dumb because we were just thinking cheapest flight. And so we got the cheapest flight and we didn't pay much attention to where it landed.
True.
We were just...
But it was close to sort of, we generally thought we'd be around Germany.
we were trying to get to Germany to buy a car.
That's right.
We knew we could get a car in Germany. So we were heading near Germany. So
now, what we found out though is, and this really relates to this topic of it depends where you're going to go traveling. Because as soon as we arrived in Zurich, I took the kids out to get some food for the day. And so as we went out, I went to the supermarket. Everything was in euros. It actually wasn't euros. It was Swiss francs. Yeah. And so anyway, I purchased all this food for the kids and me and Skylar for one day. And when I got
just basic food though.
Just basic. It wasn't
some
fancy.
Bread and some fruit.
Yep. Just basic things. I then went and just had a quick calculation. What's Swiss francs back into Australian dollars? I was like, holy guacamole! Like, we've nearly spent half a week's worth of our food budget in one day.
On breakfast.
And I was like, oh my goodness. And I went back to the hotel room and said, Skylar, we've got to get out of here quick.
Yeah, like so
we're in trouble.
Switzerland freaked us out. Landing there, we thought we'd saved money by buying a cheap flight, but landing in Switzerland and being there for a day or two before we could get out of there, we just spent so much money. Like, when we first arrived, we were in the train station. Oh, when we first arrived, and then we had to go to the train station to catch a
train to Frankfurt, to Stuttgart.
No, this is before the first experience. When we first arrived, we were in the train station, and then we had to catch a taxi to our hotel. And the kids needed to pee. My kids need to pee like every 5 minutes. Whole episode about that later.
We have enough material to do one episode just on trying to pee
in Europe. It's like Mission Impossible. Anyway, Switzerland was our first country, and like you had to pay €2 per person to get through this turnstile to pee, and it was going to cost our family at least $10.
Yeah,
and I was like, no way, hold it, you can hold it. And so the kids are like, oh, I'm I got all like angry mom because I've been traveling. I'm like, you're not peeing, you can hold it till we get to the hotel where it's free. And so it was just like, we were like, okay, so traveling to Switzerland is perhaps not cheaper than living.
True. But then our other experience that I want to share sort of gives the opposite side to that. And that was a trip we did recently to the island of Penang in Malaysia. And we had done our research a little bit. By this time, we'd travelled a fair bit more, and we tend to do our research. A little bit more wise.
Savvy,
one thing that I like to do a lot actually is go online and go to Google and just type in cost of living calculator, and there are a lot of different websites that you can go to. It just gives you a basic cost of living of what fuel is and what food costs are. And that gives me a pretty good overview of where that country stands.
Milk. If you find out how much like milk
and bread and fruit and
chicken.
Yeah, a bit of meat. That gives me generally a good idea these days of how much that's going to be. But we arrived in Malaysia, and we'd heard that it was a street food capital.
Which is why we went.
Of Asia. And we're like, wow, this is going to be awesome. What we did not realize was how cheap it was. Now, to give you an idea of that, close to where we first were living there, staying there, we would go down to the local eatery. Now, the local eateries there in Penang, Malaysia, are sort of this open space with tables and chairs and surrounded by all these different shops.
Stalls.
Yeah, they're like stalls, food stalls.
Yeah.
And you go around and you sort of choose a few things.
They're cooking up, like like stir fries and wontons and soup, and they have all these different cuisines.
Oh, there was Thai
Amazing.
food, and there was Indian food,
Yeah,
there was Chinese food. It was just all
So
sorts. So good. And then you sort of point to where you're sitting, and then you wait, and they bring it over, and you pay them. Now, I didn't realize until a bit later on, as I was sort of doing my budget and realizing what we were spending on each of the meals, but in Penang, we spent as a family around about $7 per meal for 7 of us. That's $1 per person per meal.
And it was like the best food.
And that we weren't skimping, and we weren't like starving the kids. That was a pretty generous portion, and we were paying about $1 a meal. So $3. If you're there as a single person, or even a family of 5, you're talking about $5 a meal, guys.
Yeah.
That's like the cost of a McDonald's meal for one.
And we didn't have to cook it.
Yeah, in fact, we were there for a whole
Amazing.
month. I think I could count on one hand the amount of times we actually cooked in
I think
our
it was
apartment.
like 3 times.
Yeah.
And each time I was like so annoyed that we were cooking ourselves because
We could have just gone down and had someone else cook for us and pay $1
yeah,
per person.
it's the best. So now we're going to talk about, that's one of the big 3.
The big 3.
So the big 3 considerations in travel that we really think about when we're deciding if we can afford a location, it's food.
Yep.
Because our children eat like ravenous wolves. So we need to this is like almost top priority.
Yep. Number 2
Feeding
is
the masses.
number 2 is accommodation. How we do that, and we'll talk about that in a second. And the third one,
Transport.
transport.
So we have 3 main considerations. So food is a massive one. Food, for example, back to Europe, we spent like a week's wages on breakfast.
in Switzerland.
Oh.
But then when we get to other countries in Europe, when we're in Eastern Europe, they were extremely cheap.
Yeah.
I found that what I would spend on our food bill in countries like the Czech Republic, Poland, even Hungary, was well under what I was spending back in Australia, and well under what we now spend here in the United States. I think on average, I was spending probably about 3/4 of that, even sometimes almost a half of what we spent back in those particular countries. So
Yeah, I mean, when people hear that we traveled Europe, I think something about that sounds really exotic and fancy and rich. But we actually did a lot of Eastern Europe, and it was so cheap. It was way cheaper than at home. So we were spending way less traveling than we would have been if we were at home.
yeah.
Yeah. And so food, we, like Ross was saying, we research how much the cost of groceries are, the average cost. We look up meals, we look up what kind of things they eat there. We just do a little bit of research, and then of course you get surprises along the way. I mean, we had no idea that, for example, Poland was so delicious and so cheap. It was fantastic. We're eating pierogies and goulash and all this great stuff, and we got to
Very
go to
cheap.
restaurants all the time because we could actually afford it, whereas when we were in like Germany, I mean, Germany wasn't too expensive, but eating out was difficult.
Yeah.
Germany was okay if we were living on like sausages from Aldi.
Bratwurst.
And then it was cheap. But if we were like in a pinch and we had to feed them starving, cackling children,
Cackling?
like
Feed me, feed
feed me. Cackling's not the right word. What's the right word?
My grandma used to call them vultures.
Yeah, like they are like vultures.
We want food.
We want food. So we would to feed the masses. In Germany, we'd have to like split a schnitzel in half, and then they'd be hungry like half an hour later, and we just spent like €70 a lunch.
And to be realistic for you guys, as we travel, we do not eat out at restaurants every day. Not even close. We might do it once a week, if that. Most of the time, we buy from supermarkets and we cook at home, and that has actually saved us so much money over the course of our travels, just ridiculous amounts.
And we buy whatever they're buying. So, like I always joke about Italy, when we were in Italy, there was like 87 different types of pastrami. And I was like, I just picked some and added it to a sandwich. I had no idea what I was doing, but
Yeah.
I'm trying some local food and it was cheap and it was still an adventure. We didn't have to go out and do anything fancy.
Yeah. Right.
So-
I through this travel, I've actually become really good. I'm like the shopper right now.
Yeah, we've like changed. We've switched for some responsibilities through travel. So
Yeah.
he's the shopper. I
Actually, there's
hate it
something,
now.
I get a real buzz about going to a new country and even a new place and walking to the supermarket and automatically my brain starts comparing. I'm like, wow, this is on the cheap end, or this is sort of mid-range, or whoa, this is too
It's
expensive.
your maths brain. Your
It is,
maths brain
it
is
is.
like calculating everything of like, which country have I ever been to and which is cheaper? And his brain is doing all
It's
this.
so good.
Whereas my brain wants to explode.
It sort of just fuels my economic OCD about that. So I actually enjoy that.
And you're more reliable. Like I'll get distracted. Like I'll be like, ooh, lederhosen's
Yeah,
on sale.
I don't take her shopping. I say just stay at home. I'll do the shopping because normally that sort of food budget gets blown out of the water if she comes shopping with us. So I tend to do that, and I enjoy it, and it actually is something that really is interesting to me, how different countries can have different costs of living, and maybe it does go back to my sort of economic upbringing and my university studies, maybe. I don't know.
So we're going to cover each of those 3 items more in depth in future episodes: food, accommodation, and transport, to give you like more in-depth tips. There's also more info on my blog. But so they, just to let you know, they're the 3 things we really look at. And then some other factors that come into making travel actually be cheaper than living. So what that is, it's really this huge mindset shift.
Oh, yeah.
So, and having done this now for almost 4 years, we've really changed. We didn't expect, which is stupid. Of course you change when you travel, but we didn't go in expecting to.
Well, before we started traveling with our family, we lived a pretty normal life like everyone else. We live in consumer societies where if we don't go out and buy stuff, our societies will fall apart a little bit. It's what fuels the economics of most countries of the world, and so we knew no different. That's what it was. It's you earn money and you save a little bit, and then whatever's left you sort of spend it. And we realized that we were spending stuff on stuff that we didn't need.
Yeah, so as full-time travelers, we are saving a lot of money because we spend a lot less.
A lot less on useless crap.
Yeah, like we buy essentials and we buy occasional fun things, but it's been cut right back. So spending is a big factor.
Yeah, I mean, and part of that is that we don't own a home anymore. And we'll talk about that when we talk about accommodation, but we don't own a home, which means we don't go out and buy stuff for our home. And let's be honest, when I look back at my past, we owned a home for over 12 years. We were buying all sorts of stuff for our home that we probably didn't need. And
Yeah.
it was a really big cost.
And with a home comes utilities. So as travelers, we rarely pay utility bills. Sometimes we do,
Very rarely.
but usually in our accommodation, it's included. So internet, water, power, all of that is included in the cost of accommodation. So we've automatically saved in that way.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
So, I mean, let's talk a little bit about accommodation. One thing that we like to do and has been really reliable over the past 4 years is actually Airbnb. We just love the security of Airbnb. We also love how Airbnb, if you book for a longer period of time, not a week or a couple of days, but a month, 90% of the Airbnb listings actually have really large discounts. So we generally stay for at least a month, most of the places that we go on Airbnb, and save a lot of money.
Yeah, like we've got up to 70% off, maybe even more. But we've had
Sometimes.
monthly discounts can be huge. If you just hunt.
Yeah.
I do call it the black hole when you dive into this endless pit of looking for accommodation. But particularly if you're looking for the cheapest accommodation in the whole country.
But it sort of is fun too, because you get to go and start dreaming and you see these houses and go, wow, look at this place. This is amazing.
Yeah.
And then you can do it. Now, one tip we have for you right now is don't always take the listed price as the final price it's going to be. We have been able to message owners, let them know our circumstance, and put forth offers and they have accepted them in return. So don't just accept that whatever the price is that's listed there is what you're going to have to pay, because you can negotiate that. You can ask.
You can ask for a discount, and sometimes they'll say yes.
Yeah.
Okay, so number 3 is transport of our big top 3, and we will tell you some stories in the future of us trying to transport a family around the world. Yeah, we've usually bought a car, but we'll go into more detail in that. But we like to drive and put all our crap in a car and just go wherever we want.
I think that has been the cheapest way to travel as a family. If you're listening in as a couple, that would be a little bit different. Sometimes public transportation is a good way to do it, but as a family, definitely trying to purchase a car, even a cheap car, to get around is by far the cheapest option that we have found.
Yeah, I mean, it's not always an option to buy a car. Other places like Penang, we were there for 1 month and we hired a car, and it was still cheaper because we could stay in a cheaper area because that's kind of out of the way, not in the main tourist trap areas. And we could, take ourselves to lots of free activities around the area to enjoy, so that the cost is usually offset.
Yeah, and we'll have some other information about ways to decrease the cost of car rental and other things that we have experienced. There are other ways than just the big car rental places that are possible. So We'll talk about that.
So like we said before, probably the biggest thing that makes full-time travel cheaper than living is a big mindset change. And so we've experienced this change that we really do tend to focus on experiences more than things.
Yeah, for me, I that's one of the biggest changes that I've had. I've always been pretty tight with my money. I think it was just how I was raised, and pretty conservative in that way. But one thing that has changed me dramatically at being more willing to spend my money and just being happy to do that without feeling bad about it is because I know that now what I spend my money on is actually really worthwhile things. They're not wasted. I just hate spending money on wasted things. And so our experiences now are what we spend our money on rather than things.
I have to insert here, we're not purists.
No.
I still really love souvenirs.
But our souvenirs are small.
They're small.
They might cost a couple of dollars instead of hundreds of dollars.
Yeah, I'll buy earrings or a scarf, or I like to get something from the
We do have a
places.
collection of fridge magnets that we have done all over the world.
Yes. I remember one of our kids was saying they met some traveling family that was they collected hand knives in every country. And they thought that was really cool. And I was like, we collect fridge magnets. And they were like, right.
I think it depends on we've had to do that because of our financial situation. We've had to really cut down on unnecessary things. Now, if you're in a situation that you have a bit more money, then you can make those choices. But the message of today's episode really is to tell you that no matter what your budget is, you can do this. It is possible to do it. We're proof that you can do it on all different types of budgets. And we will look forward to giving you more in-depth tips in future episodes.
Yeah, we'll keep exploring this topic. So we'd like to hear from you as well. And we'll let you know our journey and our story and what we've learnt. And we'd like to know your questions too.
Thanks, guys.
All right, see ya.
See you later.
We like British people. We've already made that clear.
Yes, because I'm from British stock.
Yes. Have you ever considered that travel could be more affordable than renting an apartment?
Why, elementary, my dear Watson. Of course it is. Today we're going to tell you why.